Are Empire State melee troops any good? In the past, I split videos up because I felt like variants were too distinct. Here is the opposite. Everything blends together so closely, I don't feel right covering them apart. So I'm changing style a little to go over all your basic Empire stuff. Spearmen, spearmen with shields, swordsmen, halberdiers, and greatswords. Let's look at how they function for you and how you can make the most out of them. Please like, subscribe, comment, and consider doing alms to my Ko-Fi temple. Sigmar is not the only one who needs your support. Let's start with the Spearman. This unit, like all the units in this video, has 120 entities on Ultra. Spearmen are 300 to recruit and 81 upkeep per turn. I feel like I've seen them with different recruit costs in different games, but that's the current state of affairs. Health is 8,280 unit-wide on Ultra for 69 health per entity, and that figure will be consistent across unit sizes. That is to say, Empire Infantry take area effect attacks on the chin, including magic. Leadership is 60, which is fairly decent as cheap infantry though. Speed is 30, and there are techs that provide mild improvements to things like leadership and speed, but nothing spectacular. Melee attack starts at 20, which is poor, with an attack interval of 5.7, which is especially poor. Granted, their animations are stabbing things, so they may not last that long, but still. Melee defense, in contrast, is 34, which is not bad at all. Weapon strength is listed as 25 with 19 base damage and 6 armor piercing, but the unit has a bonus versus large of 15. Since its value starts so low, the percentage improvement is pretty bonkers, but this winds up with melee attack 35 and weapon strength 40, split between base and AP per the original ratio. Combined with the number of entities, this is more than enough to fight off many types of early game light cavalry. Charge bonus is 4. That is horrible, and while it's still something, don't expect real results from charging. Mass is 100, bog standard. Of course, being spearmen in Warhammer 3, they get charge defense versus large and charge reflection. They are still held back by the lack of armor piercing, but against the right targets, they still perform way above what you would expect. Spearmen with shields have a slight increase in cost, going up to 350 to recruit and 94 upkeep. This is less of a difference in cost than it once was, I believe, so simply put, the only reason you'd recruit the regulars over these is because you can literally recruit the former without military buildings, and for some reason, you don't have any available. The addition of shields grants a 35% missile block chance from the front. I grant you, maybe there's different length animations too, but the attack interval is now 4.4, something like reasonable, so take that as you will. Melee defense rocks up to 42. That's it. Of course, they're not as easy to digest when archers come shooting, whereas the regular spearmen are just food. Swordsmen cost a tiny touch more, 375 to recruit and 100 upkeep, which seems slightly off, but hey, CA is doing not mine. Probably the result of tweaking. Armor is 30 again, and the shields offer the same block chance. HP is absolutely identical, as is leadership and speed. See why I didn't want to cover them separately. It blurs together some of the time. Melee attack starts out at 32, which looks a lot healthier in comparison. I mean, swordsmen against archers, their offense is legit. Attack interval is 4.3, which is why I kept using them as my red team. It's a very standard figure and gives the basis for a lot of comparison. Melee defense is 32, which is surprisingly okay. Weapon strength is 28, split between 21 base and 7 armor piercing. Again, a standardized number we will see a lot in the game, one we can use as a point of comparison. Charge bonus is 14, which is halfway decent for infantry, and mass is 100 again. There is no special sauce with this unit whatsoever, which is again why I made it a standard feature in my videos. Halberdiers cost 550 to recruit and 138 upkeep per turn, with 8,760 health between them for 73 health per entity, so they're a little beefier. Armor is 30, no shields. This means the unit is an arrow magnet, a combination of value in eliminating it and lack of inherent defense against arrows. This is important playing as Empire or playing against it. Leadership is 70, notably higher. Speed is 30, unchanged. Melee attack is merely 26, but it's a better value than Spearmen. Attack interval is an egregious 5.6, and I haven't heard of their animations being that fast, but either way, the attack's slower overall in my estimation. You need to recognize this. Cavalry attack faster. On the other hand, melee defense is 42. Now that's no better than spearmen with shields. Weapon strength is 28 to start with, split between 8 base and 20 armor piercing, with a bonus versus large of 16. This means that even though their 2-hit number and attack speed are dismal, against something like dwarfs, at least they'll do damage when they do hit. More to the point, they're there to chop up cavalry whether the cavalry is armored or not. In many cases, you can quite literally leave them alone and they'll win, it just takes a little time. Charge bonus is 8, which is a little better at least, but mass is 100 again. And of course, this is a charge defense versus large and a charge reflection unit, so cycle charging into it while it is braced will be an exercise in pain. Well, charging in and being caught when it's not braced means being chopped up too, just inflicting more damage on the attack. In other words, use will vary matchup by matchup, but they are capable of crushing cavalry far beyond their cost. Greatswords are by far the most expensive in this group, costing 850 gold and 225 upkeep. I feel their cost has been pulled down over time because they're considered the runt of the litter for elite or elite-ish infantry. Health is 9,120 across 120 entities for 76 per entity. Armor is 95, no shields, so there'll be pin cushions for dark shards. For others, that varies greatly. It'll look like they're getting hit hard, but a lot of the time the entities will linger, still alive, with muffled damage, but spread across a large number of models. Leadership is 75, so particularly loud and proud. Speed is 28, or Chaos Warrior level. Melee attack starts at a 32, which is no different from Empire Swordsman. Attack interval is 4.3, no different from Empire Swordsman. Melee defense is 30, but weapon strength is 35, inflicting base 10 and armor piercing 25 per hit with a bonus versus infantry of 14. So in effect, that's melee attack 46 versus infantry at rank 0. It's also extra damage, mostly on the AP side. Obviously, if you're fighting cavalry in pitched melee, they can pull double duty, but halberdiers are a bit better at it and have better melee defense. Also, the greatswords have no special charge defense. Charge bonus is 18, very respectable, and mass is 120 due to the extra armor. So, 5 units to compare. In the Lord Redline skills, Emperor's Finest adds a maximum of +6 melee attack and +6 melee defense to spearmen, swordsmen, and halberdier units. Even though many people do not want to use these troops at all in the late game, a lot of factions increase only one or the other. Getting both jacked up by 6 is boring but powerful. Also, in recent times we can respec lords without needing a mod, so you have even less reason to be shy. For greatswords, Honest Steel adds up to 12 armor and 12% weapon strength, and not that these are bad, but they could have benefited from the +6 melee attack and the +6 melee defense too. So you see how this unit is a little specialized, and how it craves using that fat bonus versus infantry. It's still okay on other rolls. I mean, damage is damage. At rank 7, swordsmen, spearmen, and halberdiers benefit from Strength of Hardship for +5 leadership, +5 melee defense, and 15% spell resistance, good things all. At rank 7, greatswords get Taste for Battle, adding +5 melee attack, +5 melee defense, and 10% physical resistance. Didn't I just mention how they could use... So yeah, getting greatswords to higher rank is more impactful than the other case, but it's all good. For the tech tree, to be honest, I'll gloss over this, there's so much to cover, but what has real impact is relatively narrow. State-issued infantry armor adds +10 armor, except for the greatswords. State-issued weapons adds +10% weapon strength for spearmen and swordsmen. Improved heavy weapons adds 10% weapon strength for halberdiers and greatswords. Basically, the tech tree grants decent but not exceptional aid, partly because the Empire gets so much stronger in ranged as the game goes on, partly because being a supposed all-rounder means it shouldn't get too crazy on the melee side. So here's the part of the video where we talk about using units, and since there's 5 to go over, these will be the broadest possible tips. In general, there are 2 ways to deploy spearmen: in the center of your line to tar pit better, and at the flanks to refuse them to cavalry. Note that I said and, not or. One of the easiest ways to make Empire armies last longer is to have a large core of spearmen with shields if at all possible. If you have very few, either use them as a second line desperation defense or put them on the flanks, at least that's my feeling. Why the flanks? Because most cavalry etc. doesn't want to be bogged down, but the nature of the game is that even basic swordsmen will bog them down at the center of the line, which is usually where your lord is operating. You need to have spearmen able to help protect your missile units as well as possible, since those kill the enemy faster, which is kind of a big deal for you. Swordsmen are a counterpick. As sexy as it is to have a big front row of swordsmen, it's only practical if the enemy's disposition works with you. Swordsmen will clash just fine with the likes of Ungor spearmen, or basically any spearmen, and will trade decently with a lot of other stuff, and relatively high morale means that they'll last quite a while, but that's about it. They can't be more effective than that because they don't have the tools. They're there to set the table, not to serve the main course. They're just making it harder for the enemy's spoiler units, spearmen mainly, from making your cavalry hate life. So while swordsmen are great in a bunch of situations, and ideal for whittling down the zombie hordes rather than drowning their numbers like spearmen would, in a lot of cases spearmen are the better choice for holding that line. I see little reason to avoid them. Take a few, apply them to appropriate targets, hope for the best. Halberdiers are where you really start cooking with action. Halberdiers are the Empire's foremost thou shalt not pass infantry unit, completely locking down cavalry in battle after battle. The fact they're a bit squishy to range fire is unfortunate, but they'd cost a lot more otherwise. So you protect them and then unleash them. Also, just because they have charge defense doesn't mean they only have use against charges. If the enemy's smart enough to avoid charging into halberdiers, unlike let's say ogres, then it's okay to have halberdiers in the second line, bravely charging in to relieve swordsmen being thrown around and or eaten by monstrous foes. Half a battle is showing up after all. Greatswords are meant to be a second line unit, mainly because of the lack of shields, but it all depends on what options you have. There are plenty of times when you just have to take a bullet for the Emperor and keep on fighting best you can. Whatever trickery you have to do it, try to get them into actual melee where they can do some good. Even though they're optimal against infantry, armor piercing and decent overall combat values, and 120 entities to start with, means that they will threaten large units. So you end up with greatswords often in the middle of the fight and the line, one way or another. Avoid the flanks. There is no reason to get them run over unnecessarily if you have anti-large units to deal with charges. Beyond this point, the purpose of Empire infantry is somewhat to kill the enemy and mostly to hold it in place so that ranged, magic, and so on can do its job. Having said that, it isn't necessarily the only way to go about things. Warrior Priest prayers and Runefang boosts can provide instant boosts to your melee output that helps put away a long brawl. Moreover, every melee and enemy force is quote-unquote losing, makes it easier for magic, lords, heroes, and ranged fire generally to break that unit. Since you don't have inherent fear or terror working for you, damage is how you break opponents more often than not, and damage should not be scorned, even if it comes from melee. It really comes down to guessing what the enemy will bring. Usually you can guess the enemy will bring some large, or at least you should be prepared for it, but you can also expect chaff or just infantry, and enemy anti-large infantry is one of your most noxious things if you like to use cavalry at all. That's what swordsmen and especially greatswords are there to help deal with. I think you should find a mixture you're comfortable with, and obviously one that fits within your budget and what's available in your campaign. Empire infantry are not dirt cheap when you have enough of them. So the real question is, are they giving you what you need from them? And if they are, then your problems are elsewhere, and that's an issue of selecting the right offense from ranged, artillery, and magic. Take care and have fun embarrassing the enemy with mere, lowly, cheap Empire state troops. They are not to be underestimated.